Welcome, everyone. My name is Tony Infanti, and I teach at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law, and I am also the Vice Chair for Pro Bono and Outreach for the ABA Tax Section. And just want to welcome you all and thank you for attending this information session regarding the Christine Brunswick Fellowships. And we have a great group of speakers to give you some information about the fellowships. I'm going to go in kind of reverse-ish order so that we can end up with the person that is going to start speaking first. So that two law professor folks who are here to talk to you are Les Book and Keith Fogg, who've had great experience with the fellowship, and we'll be able to talk to you from the professor's perspective about it. And then we have Meg Newman, who's counsel to the tax section, and she's going to be giving a general overview and talk about some of the administrative aspects of the fellowship. And then and this is informal, so we'll have plenty of time for questions. We're recording it just for those folks who weren't able to make it today. So I will turn it over to Meg.
Great, thanks, Tony. And it's great to have someone who's both in an administrative position for the tax section and also a professor here to lead us. So as Tony said, I'm Meg Newman, and I am counsel for the ABA tax section. And in this role, I do a lot of work with our various pro bono programs, but specifically with this program. And it's one that I think is really important for the section, and on a personal level, I really enjoy. And so I'll talk briefly, just give a brief overview, but it's a small group here. Feel free to jump in whenever you'd like. And just so that you know, we did a session specifically for students earlier this week, and we also did one specifically for the organizations that would host those students hypothetically. And those recordings will be available as well. You're welcome to send students my way at any point in time, or share the recording. So just a little bit of background. The fellowship was created in 2008, and the goal of the fellowship is sort of twofold. On the one hand, it's meant to provide sort of a career path for students who are entering the practice of law, or graduating from a JD program, graduating from an LLM program, finishing up a tax court clerkship, or for those who maybe have worked for a year or two in some other type of setting, maybe even a law firm or an accounting firm, and have decided that actually they want to, consider a career in public interest tax. But it's not meant for people who maybe had like 20 years of work experience. Someone comes back to you 10 years after they were your student. It's not quite. There isn't a specific line where you aren't a recent graduate anymore by definition of this program, but so there are some borderline cases, but mostly it's for people who've recently graduated. And so the goal is partly to provide people with the opportunity to practice public interest tax law. There aren't a ton of places where people can do this kind of work, so it was meant to create more job openings, basically in the very entry level positions, and to enable people to work with supervisors who've been practicing in the field longer and really work with them for a couple of years to start off their career in public interest tax, which can be sort of tricky to find otherwise. And hopefully that will produce lawyers who either continue to practice at an LITC or another type of public interest tax, or if they decide to go into the government or go into private practice, especially in private practice, that they would have the background to have a robust pro bono practice, and or be involved in the section's efforts around pro bono work. And then the other goal of the program is to provide host organizations. So the host organizations are usually, but definitely not required and not always, low-income taxpayer clinics. We've also placed fellows at policy-related organizations with a nexus around low-income tax issues. But I would say almost all, the majority of our fellows have been at LITCs. And so the goal there is to provide more support for LITCs. The fellows generally will do direct representation work and will have to carry some sort of caseload in addition to doing a project. And so the project is meant to benefit both the fellow and the host organization in terms of allowing them to go a little deeper on a particular issue, and they can choose what they think the most sort of meaningful issue is for them personally, and also for either the host organization or the community that they're serving. And so there are lots of different examples of very interesting projects that our fellows have taken on. If you go, and I can't multitask that well, so I'm sure as professors, you're much better at this. But when I'm done speaking, I will drop some links in the chat. But on our website, if you click on each of the sort of fellow groups, there's some summary describing their projects. I do have a document that sort of lists all the projects that I'm going to get up on the website as well. If you're working with a student, I would recommend that they not pick the same projects as someone just recently did, but they're good examples of the types of projects that the selection committee has found to be valuable. And obviously they have something to do with tax and the public interest, all of the projects. So that's the sort of general background. It's a 2-year fellowship. The salary and benefit information is on the application, but I'm happy to answer any questions. It's pegged to a federal judicial clerk salary. So it changes a little bit each year based on that fluctuation. We pay the salary, the benefits, loan forgiveness, we pay all of that directly to the host organization. So they're considered mostly an employee of the host organization, not of the ABA tax section. And they have to, when they come to the application process, the applicants should have already connected with a host organization. So they should already, the application process is, the applicant is the law student, and that person comes with a plan for a project and a plan for where they would be hosted. And then the host organization in the application materials will write a letter saying that, they're prepared to support that person, and how they would support that person and why that person would be a value add to their organization and to the community in general. So right now we're sort of in the phase where that matchmaking process is sort of happening. Sometimes you have host organizations that have already worked with a student. Maybe they were an intern or during the year, during the summer, or they've had some sort of conversations with them in some way. Maybe the person at the LITC, taught a class at the law school and this was one of their students, that kind of connection. And sometimes it's not, sometimes it's just an applicant reaching out they know which community they want to be in. And so they'll look on the website, see where the LITCs are, reach out to them. And then sometimes we also help, someone like Tony or Les or Keith who are on here, or myself would be happy to make those connections. So if you have a student who wants to be in, Virginia or Illinois or wherever, I would do my best to either connect that student with the folks that work at that LITC, or find someone who knows someone at that LITC, or maybe say, are there any other regions you might be open to if it's just not going to work out in that area? So it's sort of like this matchmaking dance, that sort of happens around this time of year. The application deadline is in November. I'll post the application, which has all the sort of the timeline there, but essentially folks submit written applications with the materials I sort of alluded to. There is a committee that reviews the written applications from the tax section. And that committee consists of strange people, like I believe Les is on it. Just kidding. So people who have knowledge of the LITC program, people who work with students are always a good fit for that committee. And then also some people who just work in the pro bono space in their, who are private practitioners and active in the tax section and care about the program. And maybe they don't work at LITC. So it's sort of a mix of people. So they review written applications first, and then they'll speak with host organizations to make sure that this is an organization that's equipped to support a young person starting off in their career. And that's very important because some organizations are not, and that's fine, but they might just not be a good fit. And we really want to make sure that these young people, or maybe not young, but people starting off in their legal careers are feeling really confident that they're getting the support that they need to succeed, and that we feel that way as well. And then the next step is there's a Zoom interview with the finalist candidates that's also done by the selection committee. All of the selection committee, I usually prep the applicants beforehand to make sure that they're aware of exactly what's going to go down, so they're not nervous when they see all those distinguished faces on the Zoom screen, or in person as we used to do them. And then we'll make offers in the winter time, so somewhere in January or February. So that's the serious timeline. And we have played around with the timeline. We're open to your feedback if you think the timeline should be different. It's really hard to sort of compete with some of the other fellowship programs, compete with the government hiring process. You know, I wouldn't say that we compete as much with the private firm hiring process because it's a sort of a different pool of applicants. But we do our best to make it work, make the timeline work. We tried doing it earlier last year and it did not yield as many applicants as we'd hoped. So we went back to this timeline. Tony, did I miss, that was my sort of general overview here. Did I miss things that you would want to mention here?
Not really. I mean, the only things that I would like one underscore is just, you know, that, yeah, a lot of the applicants get placed with LITCs, but it doesn't have to be an LITC. That, you know, the students can be thinking out of the box in terms of, you know, what they want to do. It has to be tax related naturally, but it doesn't have to be an LITC. And we've even had, you know, some where they're not really going to be doing client representation, that they would be doing other stuff. So, you know, they shouldn't feel like they have to be boxed into, I can only work at an LITC if I'm going to be doing this fellowship. You know, some creativity is welcome, I think, in that regard, as well as with respect to the nature of the projects that they do. I mean, the other things that I was thinking of, just one thing, because it's, I mean, we don't provide loan forgiveness, but we pay for students interest on their student loans while they're in the fellowship program. And so they get that. That's, you know, a really great,
most of them qualify for the
yeah, for the loan forgiveness, but that's
right.
not through, that's not through us.
Right, that's not through us. Right, that's through, that would be through the host organization, which
Yeah.
is always, which has to be by definition of the program, and it has to be a nonprofit or a government entity, but really a nonprofit.
And there's actually because I found it once, but I didn't keep the link. There's a link. I mean, basically there's a place on the web that you can go to and enter in the taxpayer ID number of the organization you're going to work at, and it will tell you whether or not they qualify for loan forgiveness. And so that's an easy thing that students can do to make sure that the place that they're going to be working at would qualify for loan forgiveness. So those were, you know, like just important points. And the other thing is, in addition to, I think you didn't mention this, in addition to, you know, paying them, paying for their fringe, paying for their interest, they also get support to come to all of the ABA tax section meetings, the big ones. So fall, not really anymore, because fall is moving to virtual next year and from then on. But for the mid-year meet, well, yeah, I guess mid-year meeting, the one in the wintertime, and the May meeting, they get travel and their registration is waived and hotel and everything paid for. So that way they can come to the meetings, make connections. A lot of times the students will be, you know, getting to speak on panel, moderate panels, you know, do things like that. So they're getting involved with the section and getting to meet even more tax practitioners, which is, you know, really a great benefit for students in their career development. So I think that's something important to think about, and that you can underscore to students that this is an additional benefit that they're getting out of, you know, doing this fellowship as opposed to some other fellowship. And then one other thing that's not related to the Christine Brunswick Fellowship, but just to put a, you know, little seed in everyone's mind, because Meg had mentioned that this fellowship is targeted really at recent grads. And she mentioned the scenario where you have somebody who's been out for 10 years and wants to switch into public interest. Well, we have a new fellowship that we partnered with tax analysts to create. And we just went through the first round of that, but we're going to be advertising the second round in the springtime. And that's going to be a process very similar to what the Brunswick process is like, in terms of, you know, basically a free for all in, you know, the organizations and the folks who might be interested in working there. The first round we did with a specific organization, Linda, we did it with La Posada Tax Clinic in Idaho, and got them someone to work there because that one had basically percolated up through the Brunswick process, that we had an applicant there, but it just didn't really match up right, in the sense that they really needed someone who had significantly more experience than a recent grad. And so that's kind of what gave rise to this whole tax analyst fellowship that now will fill in that space. So keep an eye out for that, because I'll be sending you out information about that in the springtime to the tax professor listservs. So if you have already in mind somebody, or you have somebody who comes between now and then, or even after, who wants to move into the public interest space, who's been out for a while, that's the fellowship to have in mind for them. But that was all that I had.
Excellent. Well, we're going to move to talking to a couple professors who've done a really great job supporting students in applying for this. But before we do that, does anyone have any questions so far? We'll also take them at the end if you prefer to wait.
For development, this is Laura. How can I help you?
Go ahead, Linda.
Hey, so this is kind of new.
Hi, how are you?
Thank you. This is
Sorry.
kind of new to me, both being in Idaho and also sort of this ABA fellowship. I wasn't aware of it before, and I'd love to get students set up. But, you know, other than La Posada Tax Clinic, which I've now found, I'm not real familiar yet with the low interest tax clinics in the area. And so I'm wondering, in part, are there hosts that are actually looking for students that we can match with? And do I just contact you, Meg? Is that the best way to do that?
Yeah, we don't have like a really formal way of doing that, but you know, so much of it is geography based too. So, you know, I imagine that you have some students that might be looking to go to other parts of the country or open to that. So yeah. So I think it would depend on the student that was interested and, you know, was looking for a match. I mean, if you have, I mean, we mostly finalize the person that's going to be La Posada, but if you have anyone else, feel free to share. I wish I'd talked to you a few months ago for that particular clinic. But you know, if you have folks that are interested in you know, other parts of the country, I'm happy to try to help match them. I think that's probably the.
Thank you.
And I would just add, the only thing I would add to that is when we had our host organization session the other day, there were definitely some potential host organizations that were saying, well, we have a really hard time recruiting.
Yeah, if anyone wants to go to West Virginia or Arkansas, I got some very eager folks. So.
Well, even I think there was one, wasn't there one from New Mexico the other day?
New Mexico too, yep. That's maybe a little bit of an easier sell.
A little bit easier sell, but yeah. But so, I mean, that's the other thing is it's, you know, it'll probably depend from year to year, but then, you know, when we have this information session, you have people who are interested, they're looking for somebody and they need a match. And so that's kind of a pretty ready pool of people, especially if the students flexible.
I would point the students to the publication, the IRS publication 4134. So that lists every LITC in the country. And then they could see if they had an interest in being a fellow at an LITC, they could see where they're located geographically. Then they could you know, decide if any LITC meets their criteria, and if an LITC doesn't meet their criteria, then they should start thinking about other community organizations in the community where they want to work, if they're geographically really particular about where they want to work. But I think very few LITCs would turn away a good applicant. I suspect that if you had a student who was a strong candidate and they approached an LITC, they would find the LITC would be very welcoming to their approach.
Yeah, and the only thing I might add is that the nature of the host organization, in particular, that maybe the experience or background of the person at the host organization is really important for the success of the fellowship, and not only for the success of the fellowship if they're selected, but will facilitate their being selected in the first instance. So there is a bit of a, it's important to kind of have the right match on a number of different levels.
Yeah, I would echo Les's remarks that even though there's 135 LITCs, maybe, you know, not all of them are going to have a director or somebody at the LITC who's going to be able to properly supervise a brand new attorney and teach them the things that they need to know. So you could have the student reach out to somebody like Les or myself or Meg to get some information about the organization. If you had a student who was looking and said, gee, I see an LITC in New Mexico, is that a good place to go? We might be able to find some information that would help them make a decision on whether they would get the kind of host and, you know, the training that they would need. And having a good host, as I said, not only is going to be super important for the student, but it also makes it more likely that they'll be selected. The ABA is not only looking for strong candidates from the students, but is also looking for placements that are going to be successful. They don't want to put somebody in a place that's not going to work.
That's right. Les, do you want to talk a little bit like more broadly about how to support students?
Yeah, we at Villanova have been really fortunate. We've placed, I think it's 5 or 6 students since the inception of the program. Mostly JD students, although we had an LLM student once or twice as well. And in part, Villanova has had a long tradition of kind of being engaged in this kind of
Did
low
you know
income.
that you can make a full-time income from you?
Sorry, you're breaking up. Can you say that again? Samuel?
I think that was not intentional.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So we've one of the things that we've been able to do is kind of be in a good position to connect students to institutions that could benefit from students who might want to be involved or engaged. And so that is something that we do, Keith and I have done, and Christine Spidel now does. But I think there are a lot of resources that would be willing to, and as Keith mentioned, kind of help others to try to find appropriate placement between, a student who's interested, who might be interested, and a host organization. One of the things that I've often found is that students who might be interested in tax really don't understand the connection between tax and public interest. So one of the things that I've often done is in my basic tax class is make that connection early on and give students the, planting the seed even in their earlier in their law school career, even if they're not yet 3Ls, to kind of help facilitate that. And that might allow a student to perhaps get an internship with an organization that could be the place where, in fact, they wind up connecting as a host. And in fact, one of our former students did that a few years ago at Philadelphia Legal Assistance. So and then one of the things that we've done is to help once students kind of get connected or interested, is help them through the application process. And a lot of times students, as we all know, are not necessarily prepared to put their best foot forward. So we've been engaged in kind of mooting students and kind of letting them know and understand what likely the experience will be like when they're before a group of people interviewing them, and that has been, I think, helpful. My experience has been, as Tony and Meg noted, it's such a great opportunity. Just that, in addition to connecting students to some of whom have continued on with public interest work, others have not, but have still stayed engaged with pro bono work and with the tax section. It's a life-changing opportunity, and it's just really something that I think we as a community of tax professors and those who are connecting to tax students can really do a lot to kind of open those doors. And again, so many students have no idea even that the doors are there. So I kind of view this as really a chance to let them know what the potential is, because this is not, even if the students have an interest in public interest, this is not as well known as a Skadden Fellowship or other fellowships. So we have an important role to play in opening those doors. I'm happy to speak specifically about, I could get into the weeds about the particular placements and things, but I think maybe that's best for specific questions if someone has.
I'm just going to comment that because there's been 15 years of scholars out there now, there's a lot of resources for someone who's interested by talking to somebody who's been through the program. So they're and they've gone on to, some are working in LITC, some are working in big law. I know one of the very first ones is now a professor at Brooklyn Law School. I mean, so they're very, very varied careers, and a lot of them could give good insight to any student who was interested as to what they could get out of this fellowship.
Did you wanna-
Excellent. Well, sorry, I was gonna see if anyone else had any questions. All right, Tony, did you have anything else to add?
The only thing was that, did we mention how many we usually pick every year?
No, I don't think we did. So so this fellowship is funded through we call it the TAPS endowment. So it's the Tax Assistance Public Service Endowment, which is funded in part by funds from the tax section, and then from donations that we receive, and then proceeds from the base amount in the endowment. And so, you know, the market fluctuates. So so the fund fluctuates a little bit year to year, but generally we have enough in the fund to cover 2 per year, with staggered 2-year terms. So that can be somewhere between 2 and 4 at any given time. So right now we'll have 2 going into next year, 1 for each class, but that was not due to finances. That was due to some people who accepted and then had to back out or chose to back out due to other job offers, which is something that we run into sometimes. So folks, that one was someone got an offer at the government. They wanted to go. They decided they wanted to go work for the IRS, and it was a difficult decision. But there were some other factors involved. We anticipate being able to cover 2 for the next class, so we should be able to do 2 fellowships.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions from anyone before we close it out?
Well, thank you for spreading the word and talking to your students about this and about the tax section in general. You know, they can join for free and they don't have to apply for the fellowship to take advantage of all the benefits of membership in the tax section. So thank you for sharing that with your students. And oh, you know what? Let me, I think I can multitask and I have to put my email in the chat. It's megan.newman@americanbar.org. So feel free to reach out to me at any time with any questions. I really enjoy these conversations, so I'm happy to talk to anyone about the program.